Hello everyone. So let's get started with the highlights today. And I've been doing this for a couple of days now. It's been the response has been quite good, and I'm excited to keep doing this as frequently as possible. I don't know how consistently I can do that yet. It's still the first week, but 3 days in a week. That's a good start for me. So let's get started. I know the videos are kind of getting long. Yesterday's was 26 minutes, so I want to keep today's as crisp as possible. So let's get started. Okay, so this is the first quote today, and that's from Cues, a book called Cues. And I've just started reading this. It's like I'm in the early chapters. I think maybe probably the second chapter. So this quote says, simply moving our facial muscles in the positions of expressions like tiredness, fear, and happiness activate our automatic nervous system to feel the simulated emotion. Another person's non-verbal cues can change our hormone levels, cardiovascular function, and even immune function. So I'm learning, I'm at a stage where I'm still learning a lot about cues and, you know, responses from facial expressions and stuff like that. So I don't really think I have a lot of knowledge to comment, in depth on these things. I mean, of course, I have read that. It's I've read this many places. The power of smile. That even if you don't feel like smiling, if you smile, you start feeling better. It's kind of like it's not important if the smile is coming from inside. If you feel like smiling, but smiling anyway can kind of cause that internal change within yourself, so that you start feeling better. And yeah, like I said, this is a subject that I am trying to learn more about. And maybe next time I would have much more information to share over here. But yeah, this is certainly intriguing. These things are definitely powerful. Underrated, in today's world, online first world, it's certainly underrated, but it's still very important. So let's move on. Okay, so we read a quote from this book yesterday as well, The Science of Overcoming Procrastination. Today's quote is, perfectionists have set such high standards that the thought of attempting to measure up to those yardsticks fills them with paralyzing dread. As long as they don't touch a task, it still has the potential to be perfect. But once they start on the task, there's now a very real possibility of messing it up, with some errors potentially causing irreversible damage. I think we all relate to this. I mean, as a perfectionist or recovering perfectionist, do I can definitely relate to this. And it's even the notion of procrastination. The kind of thing that I mentioned yesterday. It's not being lazy. That makes you a procrastinator. It is a lack of clarity, right? And if you don't have clarity, you can't make something perfect, right? I mean, I have this thing, I mean, and like I said, I'm trying to overcome that in myself. That I won't start on a thing unless I have a complete clarity in my mind that, okay, oh yeah, this is how it should look at the end, and then I would start it. But the reality is that that's a waste of time, because until I start it, or let me put it this way. Okay, see, like that tendency is kicking in right now, but so let me just say it how it is. um, Getting started is probably the fastest way to get towards perfection, and I'm not saying that you should aim for perfection in that, but it's, just getting started, you could probably get it to that 70% of so-called perfection. And you will probably realize by that time that, okay, that's enough. And even if you don't like it, it's done, you can move on, or at least it's helping somebody. So again, I think like the takeaway for me over here is that, just get started. And I mean, of course, like knowing that problem of perfectionism in myself, that's kind of helping me realize that, okay, I just have to get started, even if I don't have complete clarity in my mind. The clarity will come. I just have to get started. So let's move on. Okay, originals. I think, a couple of days back we saw a quote from this. So the quote is, when mothers enforce many rules but offer a clear rationale for why they're important, teenagers are substantially less likely to break them because they internalize them. The quote on, the quote we reviewed a couple of days back was also somewhat related to this. And again, I think it's like a repeated discussion. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today. But yeah, it's the rationale that's important. And sometimes, like myself as a parent, I often feel that, okay, it's not important to give a reason. I mean, they're not going to understand the reason anyway, or so I assumed. But of course they understand it. They are much more intelligent than we can give credit for. Um, so offer a clear rationale, a rationale that they can appreciate, that they can understand and appreciate. Not why it is, not why something is important to you, but why something is important for them. And truth, I'm not talking about manipulation over here. I'm talking about something that's true, something that's going to help them, in long term or in short term or in long term or both. And yeah, if you can give a clear rationale for why that something's important, they internalize it. And then, you know the outcome, that them less likely to break those rules, it becomes less important than them internalizing why they are why rules exist in the first place. And that also gives them this notion of, okay, sometimes when rules need to be broken, blindly following a rule doesn't help anybody. But if you know why a rule exists, that, okay, in what context you can break those rules. And that's again very important. So let's go ahead. Range. Okay, another quote from another quote from a book yesterday. The experiment showed that an effective problem solving culture was one that balanced standard practice, whatever it happened to be, with forces that pushed in the opposite direction. If managers were used to process conformity, encouraging individualism helped them to employ ambidextrous thought and learn what worked in each situation. If they were used to improvising, encouraging a sense of loyalty and cohesion did the job. The trick was expanding the organization's range by identifying the dominant culture and then diversifying it by pushing in the opposite direction. Okay, so I think the essence is over here that whatever your practice happens to be at the same at this current time, and if it's probably, if this is something that you've been doing for a long time, diversifying would help. It would help unblock certain notions. Chances are that you're probably stuck in certain thought patterns or certain problems, and you can't really figure out, okay, how do I get past them. And sometimes shaking up your practices help. And not just like specific objective practices, but generally speaking, that like the example goes over here. If the managers are used to conformity, then encourage individualism. Within the team, encourage team to kind of break rules, and see what comes out of that, or vice versa. And that helps, like the diversifying, that opens up new perspectives, new thought patterns, and would solve your problems. That's essentially what the book is, diversifying your thought, going broad, uh, apart from going deep. Let's move on. Oh, okay, repeated book here. So the science of overcoming procrastination. The quote is, with Newton's first law of motion, you will find that once you start, you will tend to keep going on your task. So rather than wait for an enormous amount of motivation before starting, just go ahead and start small. You will find that your motivation will snowball into ever larger amounts after you've started. Very similar to what I just discussed, like a couple of minutes back. Sometimes, um, apart from clarity, it's also the energy that, okay, no, I don't really have the energy to take on a huge task at the moment. Uh, well, just get started. And like that's another thing about perfectionism, right? You don't feel like getting started until you have that, okay, no, I can complete some milestone, some perfect milestone today. And again, that stops you. That's like, um, I mean, I don't want to call it an excuse, but it's, I mean, in myself, I see that as an excuse to not get things done or not get started. And again, yeah, something that I try to overcome every time. That, okay, I mean, I know my milestones there, but okay, can I do at least a part of it? The beginning action, the starting action, even if one thing, even if I don't complete it, like for example, if you're a programmer, you know about version control and all of that, right? And my commits tend to be complete changes. I don't like to commit things midway, and I'm trying to break that pattern. It's okay if I commit things midway, and I'm okay. I'm not going to push it probably, but at least, or even if I don't commit it, it's okay. I'll come back to it the next day. It'll still be there for me. Uh, Things I'm learning. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Poke the Box, another book that we reviewed yesterday. The world is changing too fast. Without the spark of initiative, we have no choice but to simply react to the world. Without the ability to instigate and experiment, you're stuck adrift waiting to be shoved. And I can strongly relate to this. It's very easy to get ideas, and with everything going on, there is a flood of ideas you can get at any time you want. And um, many times, there are many ideas that I've felt like, okay, I'll do this, I'll start this, and that's years later, and it's either no longer relevant or somebody else has done it, and I'm no longer motivated enough to do that. Like one example, something I mean to start soon is migrating my blogs, and there is a framework called Gatsby. When it was announced, I thought, okay, I'll do this. And Gatsby, as it is at its version 5 right now, and I've not done that yet. So, yeah, again, just get started. It's learning for me as well. Let's move on. Again, Poke the Box. Okay, it's kind of repeated books today. The factory has programmed that adventurous impulse out of us. The economic imperative of the last century has been to avoid risk, avoid change, and most of all, avoid exploration and the new. An efficient factory fears change because change means retooling and risk and a blip in productivity. Sure, we'll put up with change if we have to and welcome the predictable incremental change of productivity improvement, but please leave us alone when it comes to the word bold. So, yeah, the industrial revolution and the factory, and it has brought together a lot of different notions that we are fighting against today. I mean, in all fields, I guess, probably in creativity, in education, it's kind of like the schools have been designed, like it's a common criticism, right? Schools today, they have been designed uh, to give workers to factories, because they were designed around that time. They were essentially training children to be workers in a factory, and kind of like reduce. I mean, that's a whole different discussion. I don't need to go in there, but yeah, it's essentially talking about that. It has programmed this whole culture. This whole cogs in a machine culture that's kind of driven the adventurous impulse out of us. And like this quote says, these processes are highly resistant to change, and that's why innovation is kind of thought to be such a risky thing nowadays. I mean, it's of course it's like we are getting past that. We are living in a time right now where we're getting past that. It's not something that managers fear anymore. It's like they understand that, okay, in the world of technology, you have to uh, you know you have to keep innovating, and kind of like the previous quote said that just have to get started. The initiative, that's what's important today, not conformity as such. Conformity has its place, but not at the risk of innovation or initiative. So yeah, it's I think it's a reflection of the world that existed, and like we still see effects from that. So yeah, let's go on. Okay, Stolen Focus, another book from yesterday. So, as I read Thomas's work more deeply, I realized this is one of the crucial reasons why life has accelerated every decade since the 1880s. We are living in an economic machine that requires greater speed to keep going and that inevitably degrades our attention over time. In fact, when I reflected on it, this need for economic growth seemed to be the underlying force that was driving so many of the causes of poor attention that I had learned about. Our increasing stress, our swelling work hours, our more invasive technologies, our lack of sleep, our bad diets, and I think that this is like different books but so related to what we have been reading in previous highlights today. And I've kind of felt that, okay, readwise has this. I mean, somehow it's kind of collecting similar highlights every day. I don't know if that's really the case or if it's a pure coincidence, but this has happened enough number of times. So anyway, um I think I don't really have a lot more to add over here. What I've said, but again, this is a reflection of, again, our culture since the industrial revolution began. It's kind of um, driven the individualism out of ourselves. It's like treating people as cogs in machines. And another another victim of this happens to be our attention. Our ability to focus, and the whole book is about that. It's an excellent book, by the way. But try to read it. Again, the link will be in the description. So yeah, it's definitely powerful, and like I said, kind of related to common roots. Moving on. Okay, this book, Choose Possibility, another book that really had an impact on me. Remember too that you run a greater risk of never choosing if you pursue opportunities sequentially than if you get moving in parallel. When you process choices serially over an extended period, it's easier to say no to every single one in anticipation of the ever elusive perfect choice. When you start actively pipelining and putting safer and riskier bets in motion alongside one another to see what happens, choices and knowledge come at you more rapidly and in waves. Yeah, I think, well, another similar quote to the previous ones, it's talking about perfectionism. And this concept of having this, making this perfect choice, that's another reason why we don't start things. Talking perfectionists, and I saw this in myself very strongly, that I wouldn't start a certain thing, before I knew that this was the perfect way to start. I spoke a bit about it earlier. So yeah, this is another book that had an impact on me in this way, that okay, if I'm going to take risks sequentially, or take initiatives, or decide on things as they come along sequentially, like while waiting on one perfect choice after another, chances are I'll not move forward. So the idea is that you're going to take small risks in parallel. So for example, if I want to start a project, I'll probably do very minimal POC kind of thing, and again, I have to overcome the perfectionism, the tendency of making it perfect in the first go, and just get started. It's okay if it gets abandoned, if something else more important comes up and takes over. It's fine, it's better than not doing anything at all. It's something we have to realize. I'm talking about people who have this tendency of getting locked up in perfectionism, like myself. So let's move on. Oh, another repeated book, originals. Resolving the issue itself in is in some ways less important than understanding the path to resolving such things in the future. And agreeing on that, Zach Weide explains. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. I'm sorry. No one, including our CEO, has any monopoly on the truth. Okay, yeah, it's been a while. I'm not really recalling the context on this. On a superficial level, we can definitely relate that. It's the journey that's important. It kind of says that, it's like, okay, yeah, resolving the issue is important, but what's more important is how do you go about that. How do you resolve such things in the future, and agreeing on that. I think there is this tendency of getting to principles of solving problems and so on. I don't recall much, so I think I'm just going to go on. But that's the end of it. I have another highlight over here, which is just how to use Readwise. Like I said yesterday, I'm not really reading those. I've been using it for a long time. Excuse me. So I think that's the end of it today. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope, I don't know how long this has gone on. I feel it's kind of shorter, and I do mean to keep these things crisp. 26 minutes is quite long. I myself don't have patience for such long videos. So yeah, I hope it's been fun. It's been insightful. It's certainly helping me. So even I hope it's helping you. But in case it's not, it's still helping me reflecting on this, or reflecting on what I've read in a better way. So see you next week.